I did not expect an invitation. That is the truth I do not soften anymore. When my son got engaged, the news reached me through someone else. A distant relative mentioned it casually, the way people do when they assume you already know. I nodded and pretended I did. I smiled and said how wonderful that was. Then I went home and sat in my kitchen long after the light outside faded. We had not been close for a long time, not openly distant, just carefully quiet. Phone calls became shorter, visits became less frequent, conversations stayed on safe ground, weather, work, polite concern. No questions that lingered, no answers that mattered. So when the envelope arrived, it startled me. It was heavier than I expected. Thick paper, formal print. My son's name was written neatly on the front, like it had been practiced. I stood there holding it, coat still on, key still in my hand, as if opening it might confirm something I was not ready to know. I set it down on the table and waited. That was my first instinct, to wait. Do not rush, do not assume. Eventually, I opened it. You are invited to celebrate the marriage of... That was it. No note, no message, no handwritten line tucked inside, just the invitation, the date, the venue, the dress code, everything except warmth. I told myself not to read into it. Weddings are busy, people delegate, invitations are sent in batches. It did not mean anything, but silence has a tone, and I recognized it. I read the card again, slower this time. My name was spelled correctly. That mattered more than it should have. It meant I had not been forgotten, just managed. I sat down and placed the invitation flat on the table, smoothing it with my palm as if it were something fragile. I was invited, but I was not included. Over the next few days, no follow-up came. No call to talk about arrangements, no question about whether I would need help traveling, no conversation about where I would sit. Nothing that suggested my presence had been imagined beyond the card itself. Still, I decided I would go. I have learned that absence is often used as evidence. If I did not attend, it would confirm whatever quiet narrative had already been written about me. That was difficult. That I was emotional, that I chose not to show up. So I would show up. I began preparing carefully, not excited, deliberate. I chose a dress that would not draw attention, no bold colors, no statement jewelry, something respectful, something quiet. I did not want to compete. I did not want to disrupt. I wanted to exist without causing trouble. That alone should have told me something. When I mentioned the wedding to a relative, they hesitated before responding, just a fraction of a second too long. "Oh, that's wonderful," they said. "I'm glad you're going." Glad, as if attendance were uncertain, as if my presence were something that needed confirmation. In the days leading up to the wedding, I noticed how often people spoke around me instead of to me. Details surfaced through conversation, not communication. I learned about the schedule from someone else's social media post. I learned about the reception layout from a cousin who assumed I already knew. No one asked me how I felt. No one asked me if I was comfortable. That silence felt intentional. Still, I pressed my dress the night before, laid out my shoes, packed carefully. I stood in front of the mirror and studied my reflection longer than usual. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that I was being gracious, that I was being mature, that this was what mothers did. They showed up quietly and took the place they were given. I slept poorly that night, not because I was anxious about the wedding, because something in me already knew that the invitation was not an offering, it was a test, and I did not yet know where I would be seated when it was time to see the results. The venue was larger than I expected. That was the first thing I noticed when the car pulled in. Tall windows, clean stone, the kind of place designed to feel impressive without being warm. I sat for a moment with the engine off, hands resting in my lap, watching people arrive in small clusters. Laughter floated across the parking lot, hugs, familiar greetings. No one was waiting for me. I told myself that was fine. I stepped out of the car and adjusted my jacket, smoothing the fabric the way you do when you are trying to feel composed. The air was cool, bright. Everything looked carefully arranged. Inside, the sound changed immediately. Music, voices layered together, the smell of flowers and food. I paused just past the entrance, letting the room settle around me. There was no sign directing me anywhere, no usher looking for my name. I scanned the space, trying to orient myself without looking lost. That is a skill you develop when you don't want to draw attention. I recognized a few faces across the room, people I had known for years. They were busy, talking, laughing. I waited for someone to notice me. Eventually, a woman I did not recognize approached. She smiled politely, clipboard in hand. "Name, please." I told her. She glanced down, then up again, her smile tightening just slightly. "Right this way," she said. No warmth, no recognition, just a procedure. She led me through the room, past round tables dressed in white. I noticed names on place cards as we passed. Close family, old friends, people seated near the front, near the center, near each other. We kept walking. The music grew louder. The smell of food changed. The lighting shifted. We reached the edge of the main seating area, where the room narrowed. I saw tall curtains, a service corridor partially hidden behind them. Staff moved in and out quietly, carrying trays. We stopped. "Here you are," she said. I looked at the table. It was small. 2 chairs, positioned near the service area, not quite in the room, not quite out of it, close enough to hear the clatter of dishes, far enough that no one would pass by accidentally. I did not see a place card, just 2 settings. I stood there, confused for a moment too long. "Is this correct?" I asked. She checked her clipboard again. "Yes," she said. "That's where you're seated." I asked who the other seat was for. She hesitated. "Someone joining you shortly." That was all she said. Then she turned and walked away. I sat down slowly. From where I was, I could see most of the room, but few people could see me without turning their heads deliberately. I could hear the laughter, but it felt distant, like I was watching through glass. A server brushed past me, apologizing quietly as they adjusted a tray. I folded my hands in my lap. I told myself not to overreact. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the seating had changed at the last minute. Maybe the other seat was for someone important. I looked for my son. I did not see him. I did not see anyone from his side of the family near me either. People began to take their seats. The room filled. Conversation softened. The music shifted. Still, no one came to my table. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I kept my posture relaxed, shoulders back, chin level, the way you sit when you are determined not to look out of place. That was when I noticed something else. Every time someone passed the corridor, their eyes slid past me, not rudely, just efficiently, as if I were part of the background. I was not meant to be seen. The realization arrived quietly, not with anger, not with embarrassment, with clarity. Then I heard footsteps approaching from behind the curtain. Someone came through the service area and stopped when they saw me. I looked up. And that was when I understood why my seat had been chosen so carefully. Because the person who was meant to sit with me was not an accident. And the moment my son saw who had been placed beside me, I knew the color would drain from his face. But he had not seen us yet, not from where he stood, not until the room shifted and the truth moved into view. She stood there for a moment before sitting down, not unsure, not rushed, just taking in the space the way someone does when they already understand what it means. She was dressed simply but carefully, nothing loud, nothing flashy, the kind of presence that does not compete for attention but holds it anyway. When she pulled out the chair opposite mine, the legs scraped softly against the floor, loud only because everything else felt hushed to me. She smiled when she sat. "Hello," she said. Her voice was calm, familiar in a way I could not place immediately. I returned the smile out of instinct. "Hello." For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The noise from the main room carried on without us. Glasses clinked, someone laughed too loudly, music shifted again. Then she leaned forward slightly and said quietly, "I wasn't sure if you'd recognize me right away." I looked at her more closely then, in her eyes, the shape of her mouth when she held a smile just a second longer than necessary, and something in me tightened. I said her name without realizing I remembered it. She nodded. "It's been a long time." I felt heat rise in my chest, not anger, not fear, but something closer to shock, the kind that makes the world tilt just enough to feel unreal. Of all the people who could have been seated with me, this was the one person who should not have been. I glanced instinctively toward the main room. My son was still not in sight. She followed my gaze. "He doesn't know yet," she said. I asked her why she was here. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she folded her napkin carefully on her lap, the way someone does when they expect to stay. "I was invited," she said. The words landed heavier than they should have. "Invited by whom?" I asked. She lifted her eyes back to mine. "By your son." For a moment, I could not speak. The room seemed louder suddenly. The service door opened and closed again behind us. A tray passed close enough that I could smell the food. I asked her if she was sure. She nodded. "I have the invitation," she said. "My name was on the seating chart." I felt something settle into place inside me then, a shape I did not want to recognize yet. She looked around briefly, then back at me. "I think this table was chosen on purpose," she said quietly, "so we wouldn't be obvious, so we wouldn't be hidden completely either." I swallowed. I realized then that this was not a mistake. The seat, the location, the lack of a place card with my name, this was deliberate. I asked her how long she had known about the wedding. She told me. I asked when she had spoken to my son. She told me that too. Each answer pulled something further apart inside me. She did not sound proud. She did not sound apologetic. She sounded factual. That was worse. I noticed how comfortable she seemed sitting there, how she did not glance around nervously, how she did not check to see who might be watching. She had already accepted her place. I wondered when mine had been decided. She leaned back slightly and said, "I didn't know you'd be seated here too." I almost laughed. "You didn't know?" I said. She shook her head. "No, but once I saw the table, I understood." "I understood what?" I asked. "That this wasn't about us," she said. "It was about control." I did not respond. I watched people begin to turn their attention toward the front of the room. Someone tapped a microphone. Chairs shifted. The music shifted just enough to signal importance. The bride appeared, glowing, arm linked with her father, and the room leaned forward as one body. I stayed seated, not out of defiance, out of instinct. The woman beside me stayed seated too. For a moment, that felt wrong. Then it felt intentional. I watched my son from the corner of my eye. He faced forward, shoulders squared, jaw tight. He did not look back again. He did not need to. He already knew where we were. The woman beside me folded her hands neatly in her lap. "You don't have to stand," she whispered. "No one is watching back here." Her certainty unsettled me. I asked her how she knew my son. She looked at the altar, not at me, as if answering without turning would soften the truth. "I knew him before he learned how to hide," she said. I felt a chill move through me. "Before he learned how to hide what?" I asked. She paused, long enough that the music seemed to swell around us. "Before he learned how to curate his life," she said, "what he shows, what he buries." I studied her profile then, the calm in her face, the lack of nerves. She was not here hoping for approval. She was here because she had already survived the worst of him. I asked her why he invited her. This time she turned toward me. "Because I asked him to." The words landed quietly, firmly. I asked her why. She inhaled slowly, then let it out. "Because I was tired of pretending I never existed." I felt something press against my ribs. I asked her how long she had known him. She told me a number that did not feel real. "Long enough," she said. "Long enough to watch him become someone else." I asked her if she had known about me. She nodded. "He spoke about you often," she said, "always with admiration, always with distance." "Distance from what?" I asked. "From responsibility," she replied. The ceremony continued. Vows spoken, smiles exchanged, applause rippled through the room. None of it touched our table. I asked her if she had expected to sit with me. "No," she said. "I expected to be hidden, a back row, a corner, something forgettable." She glanced at the table number. "This is not forgettable," she added. No, it wasn't. I asked her if she thought he wanted me to see her. She considered that. "I think he wanted you to feel something without being able to question it," she said. "Discomfort without explanation." That sounded like him. I asked her what she wanted. She did not hesitate. "To be acknowledged," she said. "Not publicly, not dramatically, just accurately." "Accurately how?" I asked. "As part of the story," she said, "not erased from it." The officiant pronounced them married. The room stood again. Applause rose and fell. People began turning, looking, whispering. I felt eyes drift toward our corner. The woman beside me remained still. I realized then that she had nothing to lose. I asked her what she planned to do next. She smiled faintly. "Eat the meal I was served," she said. "Leave when it ends. Say goodbye to no one." I asked if she loved my son. She did not answer right away. Then she said, "I loved who he was when he thought he could not be cruel." That answer told me everything. I asked her if she regretted coming. She shook her head. "No," she said, "this seat was worth it." I felt a strange solidarity then, not friendship, not an alliance, recognition. Two women placed deliberately where we would unsettle the same man in different ways. I watched my son turn again, briefly as guests began moving toward the reception area. His eyes met mine for half a second, then they flicked to her. His smile faltered, just slightly. That was the woman, and she was not here to cause a scene. She was here to exist. And that, I realized, was exactly what he feared. After the vows ended, the room did not relax the way it was supposed to. People smiled, people clapped, but there was a stiffness underneath it, like everyone was performing relief instead of feeling it. The newly married couple turned to face the guests. My son's smile was fixed now, polished, practiced, the kind he used when he needed control. His eyes scanned the room quickly, not to find joy, to assess damage. They landed on our table again. This time he did not look away. The woman beside me met his gaze calmly. No challenge, no warmth, just presence. I watched something flicker across his face. Recognition, then calculation, then something close to fear. The bride leaned toward him and whispered something, still smiling. Her hand rested lightly on his arm. He nodded without listening. The music changed. The officiant stepped aside. Guests were invited to transition toward the reception hall. People stood, chairs scraped again. Still no one approached our table. Not family, not staff, not even curiosity. It was as if the space around us had been marked. I noticed the woman was straightening her posture. "This is where it usually happens," she said quietly. "What happens?" I asked. "Where people pretend not to see you," she replied, "because seeing you would require explanation." She was right. Servers moved past us with trays, eyes averted. Conversations nearby lowered in volume, then resumed once people passed. We were not part of the flow. We were an interruption. I asked her how she managed to stay so composed. She smiled faintly. "When someone has already decided you don't belong," she said, "you learn not to ask permission to exist." The reception hall doors opened. Lights softened, music shifted, laughter grew louder. My son walked ahead with his new wife, greeting guests, accepting congratulations. He did not come near us. He would not, because approaching us would require acknowledging why we were there, and he was not ready for that. I felt a familiar ache then. Not new, just resurfaced. The ache of being useful when invisible, honored in words, avoided in reality. I asked myself whether I should stand and move closer, join the crowd, force the moment. But the woman beside me shook her head slightly. "Let it unfold," she whispered. "This part only works if you stay where you were placed." She was right. I stayed. From where we sat, we could see everything. The bride was laughing with her friends. My son greeted distant relatives warmly. The careful choreography of celebration, and beneath it, the tension he could not hide. Every few minutes he glanced back. Each time his shoulders stiffened. He was not afraid of scandal. He was afraid of proximity. I asked the woman how long she planned to stay. "Until he understands," she said. "What understand?" I asked. "That pretending I never mattered does not make me disappear." I felt something tighten in my throat. I realized then that this ceremony was no longer about marriage. It was about containment, about managing what could be seen, what could not, what had to remain unspoken. A server finally approached our table. He hesitated, then asked if we would like water. The woman thanked him. I nodded. As he left, she leaned closer. "Notice how even service requires permission," she said. I noticed. Everything about this moment was deliberate. The seat, the distance, the silence. The ceremony was designed to celebrate unity. Instead, it revealed a fracture, not loudly, quietly, precisely. I watched my son laugh again, too loudly this time. The woman beside me watched him too, not with longing, with clarity. "This is the part people remember," she said, "not the vows, the discomfort they cannot explain." I believed her, because as beautiful as the ceremony had been, something essential had shifted, a truth had been seeded, and no matter how carefully the rest of the evening was managed, it could not be unseen. This was the ceremony, not the one on the altar, the one unfolding silently, exactly where we had been placed. The reception settled into its rhythm without us. That was the strange part. Music played, glasses clinked, laughter rose and fell in waves. From a distance, it looked like joy. Up close, it felt managed. No one told us to move. No one asked if we were comfortable. They simply continued as if the table near the service area did not require acknowledgement. Silence does not always arrive as quiet. Sometimes it arrives as an exclusion that is so complete it feels intentional. I watched people choose their paths carefully. Guests who had glanced toward our table earlier now took longer routes. Conversations that drifted too close redirected mid-sentence. Even the staff seemed unsure how to treat us, not rudely, cautiously, as if interacting with us might require permission they had not been given. The woman beside me folded her napkin neatly on her lap. She did not touch her drink. "This is the longest stretch," she said softly. "The longest stretch of what?" I asked. "Of silence that is meant to teach you your place," she replied. I felt the truth of that settle in my chest. No confrontation came, no announcement, no explanation, just absence. That is how silence works when it is used as control. It is not loud enough to protest, but heavy enough to shape behavior. I thought about standing up again, about walking towards my son, about asking a simple question: why am I here if I am not welcome? But the silence stopped me. Not fear, understanding. This silence was not accidental. It was curated. I broke it, I would become a disruption. And disruptions are easy to dismiss. I noticed how my son avoided looking in our direction now. Earlier, he had checked often. Now, he trusted that nothing would happen. He had settled into relief. That hurt more than his earlier tension. Relief means you believe the risk has passed. The woman noticed it too. "He thinks the moment is over," she said. "Is it?" I asked. She shook her head. "Silence only delays truth. It does not erase it." She leaned closer, her voice barely above the hum of conversation. "Do you know why they seated you here?" she asked. I shook my head. "Because placing you in the center would require acknowledging your role," she said, "and placing you completely outside would look cruel. This was the compromise, visible enough to say you were included, hidden enough to say you did not matter." I felt something shift inside me then. Not anger, recognition. This was not about seating, it was about narrative. They wanted the story of the day to move forward without interruption. I had been positioned where I could not influence it. Silence thickened around us. A speech began at the front of the room. Someone joked about family, about love, about support. People laughed. I did not. The words floated past us without landing. Family means something different when it is spoken by people who decide who counts. I noticed the woman's hands tremble slightly, then still. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. "I am remembering," she said. "That is all." "Remembering what?" I asked. How often silence was mistaken for acceptance. I thought about all the times in my life I had stayed quiet to keep peace, all the moments I had chosen not to speak so that others could feel comfortable. I wondered how many of those silences had been misunderstood as consent. Around us, the reception continued. Plates were served. Toasts were raised. A server paused near our table again, uncertain. She glanced toward the head table, then back at us. "I would like to bring you dinner," she said carefully, "but I am not sure if this table is part of the seating plan." The woman smiled kindly. "We are guests," she said. "Please bring whatever is allotted." The server nodded and left. I watched my son laugh again at something someone said. He looked free now. The silence had done its job, or so he thought. I turned to the woman. "How long have you known him?" I asked. She took a breath. "Long enough to know he avoids what makes him uncomfortable," she said. "And you still came?" "Yes," she replied, "because avoidance only works when everyone agrees to participate." I felt my throat tighten. The silence around us was no longer empty. It was full of things unsaid, full of choices made quietly, full of truths waiting. I realized then that this stretch of silence was not for us. It was for him, to see if we would disappear, to see if the placement worked, to see if the discomfort would fade without confrontation. I sat straighter in my chair, not defiantly, deliberately. I did not need to raise my voice. I did not need to stand. Presence alone was enough. The woman noticed and mirrored me. Two figures seated calmly where they were not meant to be noticed. Silence continued, but it no longer felt like erasure. It felt like pressure. Pressure building slowly, because silence can only hold for so long before someone has to explain it. And when that moment comes, it is never the quiet ones who panic. It is the ones who depended on the quiet to keep their story intact. The silence stretched, and I understood something clearly. This was not the absence of sound. This was the pause before something finally had to be acknowledged. The silence did not break all at once. It thinned. People began to notice us again, not because we moved, but because the tension could no longer be ignored. Awareness spreads the way it always does at gatherings like this, quietly, sideways, in looks that lingered a second too long. Someone from the groom side finally approached our table, a distant cousin, I think. He smiled too brightly and asked if everything was all right. "Yes," I said. "Thank you." The woman beside me said nothing. That unsettled him more than anger would have. He nodded, lingered, then drifted away, glancing back once as if to confirm we were still there. We were. The speeches ended. Applause rolled through the room. People stood. Chairs scraped against the floor. Movement returned. And with it came consequences. My son did not come to us immediately. He stayed near the head table, speaking to someone in low tones. His shoulders were tense again. The ease he had found earlier had vanished. I watched him run a hand down his tie. He was recalculating. The woman leaned toward me. "Now it begins," she said. "What begins?" "The part where silence stops protecting him." The first ripple came from the bride's side. I noticed her mother looking over more than once. Her expression was not angry, it was confusion. Confusion spreads faster than outrage. A server returned with plates. This time she did not hesitate. She set them down gently, as if correcting an earlier mistake. I thanked her. She met my eyes and nodded. That small act felt larger than it should have. My son finally approached. He stopped a few feet away, not close enough to sit, not far enough to pretend he had not seen us. "Mom," he said. His voice was careful, controlled. I looked up at him. "Yes," I replied. He glanced at the woman beside me, then back at me. "Is everything okay?" he asked. The question was absurd. Everything that was not okay was standing between us. "Yes," I said again. "We are fine." He waited for more. An accusation, a scene, something he could respond to. The woman remained silent. That was when I saw it. Fear. Not me. Of explanation. Because now people were watching. Because now someone might ask why his mother was seated there. Because now the placement needed a reason. He leaned closer and lowered his voice. "We can move you if you want," he said. "Move me where?" I asked. "Anywhere," he replied quickly, "wherever you would be more comfortable." Comfortable. I thought about the word, about how often it is used to smooth over decisions already made. "I am comfortable," I said. "I have been sitting here the entire time." His jaw tightened. The woman finally spoke. She stood, not abruptly, gracefully. People noticed immediately. She placed her napkin on the table. "Thank you for your concern," she said calmly, "but we are exactly where we were seated." Her voice carried, not loudly, clearly. My son flushed. "This is not the time," he said. She looked at him. "There is never a time you plan for honesty," she replied. "That does not mean it should be avoided." The room was not silent now. It was attentive. My son glanced around. Too many eyes, too many questions forming without words. He tried again. "Let's talk later," he said. "Later does not undo what has already been seen," she answered. I stood there, slowly. I felt steady. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I simply said one sentence. "I am proud of you today." It landed heavier than anger, because pride spoken in moments like this forces reflection. He stared at me, searching my face. "For what?" he asked. "For surviving what you chose not to look at," I said. He opened his mouth. I closed it. The bride's mother stepped closer. "Is everything all right?" she asked, concerned now. "Yes," I said gently. "Everything is as it should be." The woman beside me nodded. We did not elaborate. We did not need to. The damage was not in what we said. It was in what had already been noticed. People began to whisper, not about us, about him, about the seating, about why. That is the aftermath no one prepares for. Not confrontation, consequence. My son stepped back. He nodded stiffly. "We will talk later," he said again. I watched him walk away. His posture was different now. He was carrying something he had hoped to avoid. The reception continued, but the energy had shifted. The story of the night had changed. It was no longer seamless, and it would not be forgotten. The woman sat back down. "You handled that well," she said. I exhaled slowly. "I did not plan to," I replied. "You did not need to," she said. "The truth does not require planning." Around us, the room settled into a new awareness. We were no longer invisible. We were referenced. And once that happens, silence can never fully return. That was the aftermath. Not a scene, not a fight, but a fracture in the story he thought he controlled. And fractures have a way of spreading long after the music stops. The reckoning did not happen at the reception. That surprised me. It waited. It waited until the music softened, until people loosened, until the evening moved into memory. Reckonings rarely arrive during applause. They arrive when there is no audience left to impress. I left early, not abruptly, not dramatically. I said my goodbyes to the few people who approached me with quiet politeness. Some hugged me. Some simply touched my arm and said it was good to see me. Those words carried more weight than they should have. It is strange how being acknowledged can feel like restoration. The woman walked with me to the car. "You will hear from him tonight," she said. I nodded. I knew that too. The drive home was quiet. Street lights passed rhythmically. My hands rested calmly on the steering wheel. I did not replay the ceremony. I did not rehearse conversations. That was new. For years, I had rehearsed everything. That night, I did not need to. When I arrived home, I made tea. The familiar motions grounded me. Kettle, cup, steam rising in the dim kitchen light. My phone rang while I was standing at the counter. His name lit the screen. I did not answer immediately, not to punish him, to remind myself that I was allowed to choose when. When I did answer, I spoke first. "I am home," I said. There was a pause. "Mom," he began, his voice strained, "what was that tonight?" "What do you mean?" I asked. "You know exactly what I mean. Why did you do that?" I leaned against the counter. "Do what?" I asked again. "Bring her?" he said. "Sit there? Let people notice?" I smiled faintly. "I did not bring anything," I said. "I accepted the seat I was given." "That is not fair," he snapped. There it was. Fairness invoked only when control slips. I waited. "You embarrassed me," he said finally. "No," I replied quietly. "I reminded you." "Of what?" he asked. "Of who I am," I said. Silence followed. Not the kind filled with anger, the kind filled with recognition. "People were asking questions," he said. "Yes," I replied. "They were wondering why you were seated there." "Yes." "They were confused." I let that word sit. "Good," I said. He exhaled sharply. "You could have talked to me," he said. "I did," I replied, "many times, just not in ways you wanted to hear." He did not deny that. I asked him one question. "Why did you place me there?" He did not answer immediately. Then he said it. "It was complicated." I closed my eyes. Complicated is what people say when the truth sounds worse. "Try again," I said. Another pause. "We did not want—" he started, then stopped. "You did not want what?" I asked. "We did not want things to feel awkward," he said. "Awkward for whom?" "For everyone," he replied. "Everyone except me." He sighed. "You have always been sensitive, Mom." That sentence had lived in our house for decades. I did not react to it anymore. "Sensitive people notice things earlier," I said. "That does not make them wrong." He tried another angle. "You do not understand how stressful today was." "I do understand," I replied. "I understood so well that I stayed quiet until you forced the contrast." That landed. His voice softened. "I did not mean to hurt you." "I believe you," I said, "but intent does not erase outcome." He was quiet. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "Who is she?" The question was smaller than the evening, but heavier. "She is someone who was also asked to disappear," I said. He did not respond. "She survived it," I continued, "and she recognized the pattern when she saw it happen to me. That is why she was there, to remind me I was not imagining things." Another silence. Longer. "Mom," he said slowly, "I did not think you would notice." That was the truth. "I noticed," I said. "I always do. I just used to forgive faster than I should have." His breath caught. "I never wanted you to feel less important," he said. "Then you should not have placed me where I would not be seen," I replied. There was nothing left to argue, because everything had been said. I told him one final thing. "I am not angry," I said. "I am awake, and that changes what I will accept going forward." He asked what that meant. "It means I will not shrink to make things easier for you," I said. "Not anymore." He did not protest. He could not. The reckoning was not loud. It did not end with an apology or reconciliation. It ended with understanding. Understanding that the balance had shifted, that the silence he relied on was gone. When the call ended, I stood alone in my kitchen. The tea had gone cold. I poured it out and made another cup, fresh, because some moments deserve a reset. That was the reckoning. Not punishment, not revenge, but clarity, the kind that cannot be unlearned. And once clarity arrives, nothing ever returns to the way it was before. The reclaiming did not begin with confrontation. It began the next morning. I woke up later than usual. Sunlight had already found its way through the curtains, resting softly across the floor. For a moment, I lay still, listening to the quiet of my own house. Not the heavy quiet of loneliness, a settled quiet, the kind that does not ask anything of you. I noticed something immediately. I did not feel the urge to check my phone. For years, mornings had started with a subtle tension, a scan of messages, a wondering if I had said too much or not enough, a habit of bracing myself before the day even began. That morning, there was none of that. I made breakfast slowly. I ate at the table instead of standing at the counter. I let the day arrive instead of chasing it. That was when I understood what reclaiming actually is. It is not about taking something back from someone else. It is about returning to yourself. In the days that followed, the wedding became a story people told around me. Neighbors mentioned how beautiful it was. Distant relatives said they were glad to see me there. Some spoke carefully. Some spoke warmly. No one mentioned the seating directly. They did not need to. My son called again later that week. This time, there was no defensiveness in his voice. He asked how I was doing. I told him the truth. I said I was well. He hesitated, then said something that surprised me. "I did not realize how often I decided things for you," he said. "I thought I was helping." I did not rush to reassure him. "Helping only works when it requires someone else to disappear," I said. He agreed. Not quickly, but honestly. We did not fix everything in that conversation. We did not need to. Reclaiming does not demand immediate repair. It demands boundaries that are clear enough to stand on. After that, small things changed. When plans were made, I was asked directly. When opinions were offered, mine was not summarized by someone else. When silence appeared, it was no longer assumed to be an agreement. I noticed how differently I moved through rooms. I did not wait to be directed. I did not adjust my presence to match someone else's comfort. I spoke when I wanted to. I stayed quiet when I chose to. The difference mattered. I thought often about the woman who had sat beside me at the ceremony. We met for coffee once. We did not talk much about the wedding. We talked about gardens, about the weather, about how strange it is to be underestimated simply because you are no longer loud. She smiled at me and said something I will never forget. "They don't expect us to notice. That's their mistake." She was right. Reclaiming is noticing. Noticing when you are being managed instead of included. Noticing when politeness is being used as a leash. Noticing when silence is expected rather than chosen. And then deciding, calmly, that you will no longer participate in your own erasure. I did not become harder after that. I became clearer. I stopped explaining myself unnecessarily. I stopped shrinking my needs to fit other people's narratives. I trusted the quiet authority of my own experience. And something unexpected happened. People adjusted. They always do. because most systems rely on you staying where you are placed. The moment you stand where you belong, the system has no choice but to shift. The wedding no longer feels like a wound when I think about it now. It feels like a marker. The moment when I stopped being grateful for being included at all and started expecting to be included properly. That expectation changed everything. If you are listening to this and something inside you feels uncomfortably familiar, I want you to hear this. Being quiet does not mean being invisible. Being patient does not mean being disposable. Being kind does not mean being movable. You are allowed to take up space without explanation. You are allowed to be seen without apology. And sometimes, the most powerful reclaiming happens not when you stand up in the room, but when you stop sitting where you were placed to be ignored. Thank you for staying with my story. If it resonated, you are not alone. And if you choose to stay here, more stories like this will follow. Stories about dignity, about recognition, and about the quiet strength it takes to reclaim yourself.